We'd like to give you a warm welcome to Monash Music Society's podcast project Pathways in Music. Over the course of this series, you will hear from guest artists who are experienced in developing and pursuing a career within music, and of course some classic banter from me and George.
Hey guys, so I'm Jordan. I'm the classical representative for the Monash Music Student Society. And yeah, me and Jess just thought this would be a fun little podcast we could do. We'll be interviewing different people every time. So a fun fact about me is everything I say sounds sarcastic. Even without trying to make it sound sarcastic, I really am excited. I'm asking people questions and I just sound like I can't be bothered doing it. And the reason why I know this about myself is because I was music captain in high school back in Perth, and I was emceeing the Eisteddfod, and after every act that I had to announce, everyone was like, oh wow, he sounds excited. And then after that, after the whole Eisteddfod, my principal comes up to me and she goes, Jordan, you could sound a little more excited. This is the principal of my high school. And I was like, what do you mean? That's just how I talk. She was like, well, everything he says sounds so sarcastic. I was like, okay. So yeah, that's my fun fact. I always sound sarcastic without meaning to.
Oh.
So because I'm the classical rep, I obviously like classical music, and Jess Mahler is one of my fave composers, and Jess is actually related to Jess Mahler. So the first time I met Jess, I almost cried. I gave her a hug. I was like, oh my God, you're related to my favorite composer. That's the first time we met.
Yeah. So I am related to Jess Mahler. That's the greatest thing I've ever accomplished. I'm the jazz representative at Monash for 2020. I play the saxophone. And my fun fact is that I've been to music camp every year since 2011. And when I finished high school, instead of just not going, I actually started teaching at music camp so I could keep going. Album of the week! Play that thing. Play that thing. Whoa, George, do you know what time it is?
No, Jess, what time is it?
Why, it's Album of the Week time. To start off our first installment of Album of the Week, we're taking it all the way back to the 70s to get down with the legend himself, Bill Withers. Withers' second album, Still Bill, is a timeless classic that is full of bangers that get the feet tapping and the soul teeming with groove. So this is my hot pick for the week.
On the other hand, very different compared to Jess, my album of the week is any album of Mozart's Clarinet Concerto. Fun fact about Mozart, his first symphony was actually written when he was only 8 years old, is when he wrote his first symphony.
Whoa.
Yeah, so bit of a different fun fact and album to Jess, but that's mine for this week that I've been listening to non-stop.
So you can find our albums of the week over on the Monash Music Society Spotify account. While you're there, you'll also be able to find Monash's Mighty Musicians, which is a playlist that includes all of our past and present students' new releases coming out this year.
All right, so today we have a very special guest, Hayden Mitt, joining us in our very first podcast.
Hello, everyone.
So Hayden, if you just want to start, just some background on who you are.
Yeah, so my name's Hayden Mitt. I'm I suppose an honours student at the Sir Zalman Cowan School of Music. I started in 2016 doing the jazz degree in the guitar performance, I should say. So with regards to Monash, that's about as deep as it gets. I do a lot of work with the popular faculty under Rod and Gerald, and now with the pop music as well as voice. Outside of the School of Music, I do work with a couple bands. I play with the Mamas, probably most prominently. So the Mamas have toured up and down the East Coast a couple times and played some fun festivals. So I play guitar for them, and I do some arranging and band. General band management from there, and I play with a few other groups around Melbourne. Shanghai Sallies, I've played with bands called Atticus Street in the past, and a number of projects, and I think most of my focus right now is in research and academia and those things, so it keeps me, I've got a lot of things keeping me busy, which is good fun, so nothing nothing is a surprise. I'm always doing something on the agenda.
You just released a single with the Shanghai Sallies as well, right?
I did. We've kind of released 3 in a very short period of time. But yeah, most recently was Better Than Me with the Shanghai Sallies, which is a great track. You can hear it anywhere you listen to your music. I made sure it was everywhere you could possibly find it, and even places you never thought you could. So,
do we have a cheeky sample here? Play that thing.
Is she better than me? I get home late like I was meant to do. I find myself squaring up with you. I know you're mad and it's not hard to tell. Once you kick my bag down the stairwell, and I bought you flowers, but it wasn't
amazing.
enough.
Brilliant. So what got you into music? Have you always been passionate about playing or teaching, or?
Yeah. So what got me into music was probably most importantly, my mother just signed me up to piano lessons, and that's kind of where it started. And I confess I didn't care a whole lot about music for probably the first 10 years of those lessons. I just did it because my mother told me. But I realized once I could make some of my own decisions regarding that, I found a greater interest. So that's when I started playing the trombone in the school orchestras. I played the bass guitar for a bit, but when I found the guitar, that was like, right. this is how music is meant to feel. It's not just ticking boxes. It's like I can actually make things. How exciting is that? So what got me into it was that first feeling of like creation. And as a result, I've been really obsessed with creating things as much as I can. So I've got a decently equipped studio in my house. I like to do lots of writing projects, dealing, at least in my role at the School of Music, doing students' recitals and helping them make some kind of product. So for me, it's always focused on like a product creation, whether that product is something you see once live on stage or it's a recording you can listen to as many times as you want. That's what's got me into it. And have I always been passionate about playing and teaching? The teaching thing has crept up on me in the last 5 or so years. So I was teaching right out of school when I was in school actually in year 12. So from when I turned 18. And I've been teaching basically constantly ever since. I used to teach classical voice and guitar, and I taught music theory to a lot of my students as well. The teaching thing has crept up on me, and I've really enjoyed that feeling it gives, because it's like creating a human as opposed to a product. It's creating something that can then create more, and I really like that. It's a really rewarding feeling.
Awesome.
You mentioned you're in a few bands, make a few songs. So like in regards to that in the industry, what specifically do you do, and what style are the bands that you're in?
Yeah. Well, my contribution to the industry at large is probably a bit mixed, because as much as I do a lot of creation with bands that are predominantly probably more in the popular music sector of things, I've done jazz compositional projects in the past and played other people's improvised compositions and whatnot. But my main input into the industry is probably not as a composer or creator. I do a lot of playing, so most of my income outside of that, dare I say, 90% of my income before this coronavirus thing was all in weddings and function performances. So I played with a number of groups for whether a company had an end of year breakup of some kind, so that might have been some jazz or might have been some rock music, or playing weddings as well. So I sing and play guitar in a couple of just ad hoc wedding groups as they come up. So that's that was, I suppose, my primary source of income for many years, and I really enjoyed that. So what I do in the industry, I do a number of things, and I try to make sure every one of them is fulfilling me in some way, whether it's paying my rent or whether it's fulfilling that deep creative need. Best case scenario, it does both. You balance that as you go.
What has kept you motivated, like since you picked up the guitar until now?
What has kept in motivation is a funny thing, because I've never felt like a particularly motivated person, and I think that motivation is something that's if you are a motivated person, you have a leg up over so many others. Because motivation, it ties on self-esteem, it ties on how you could be feeling, not in a day, but in a particular snapshot of a day. You might feel particularly inspired or motivated to work on a project, but it can only take, the pen not hitting the page in the right way for that motivation to quickly disappear. So I would not describe myself as a motivated person. I think if anything else, I would. I think what has kept me, if I substitute what has kept me motivated, what has kept me going, is the overarching goal. I try to keep a relatively a cognizant schedule, and no matter how I'm feeling, I always try to do something about what I'm doing, whether or not that's a solid hour of doing lots of solid research and reading and annotating a journal of some kind, or whether it's maybe I'm just sitting there writing music. I try to make sure I keep a schedule of what it is I'm doing. And if I only acted when I was motivated, I would never get anything done. So what has kept me going is a goal at the top of everything, making sure that I'm fulfilling, I suppose, what I feel my obligations are, which is, as I said, to create.
Awesome. And do you think that your ideal music career ever changed? And like, did you have to overcome anything or navigate any new opportunities or learning or how to find these?
Oh, it changed just this week. It changes almost constantly. So I think if you approach music with the conception that you are going to be one thing, I think everyone agrees it's very lofty and it's possible, but it'll be a rough path. So you'll always have to have, and both of you, I'm sure, are teachers and you do lots of playing and performing. You're studying, so you yourselves are multifaceted musicians. Yeah. So has my ideal career changed? Constantly. When I was a kid, I probably wanted to just be John Mayer, and that's it. And when I realized I couldn't quite write songs like John Mayer, I was like, okay, what else is my contribution? So there's a particular. I was put onto a podcast from a friend of mine, a bass player friend of mine that I play with. He told me to have a listen to something, and it was talking about this guy's views on career and success, and a few, mainly how to be the best version of yourself. And one of the things he commented is, there's always somebody who can do it better than you. But if you have a particular strength in something, if you think you can be the best in the world at something, you will need to find a way, A, to fund that, but B, you'll have to put a lot of time into it. So has my career changed? Surely. Yeah, today, I've spent a lot of time working on some research, and one of my ultimate goals for my PhD, for my life, is to have a doctoral qualification, to have a research output, be working in universities. That's a major career point in mind, but I'd also love to tour worldwide as a guitar player, whether with my own music or whether with someone else's. So has that changed? Oh, yeah, certainly. And every time you have a new goal, you need to revise, well, how do I not only start, but how do I keep going? Because it's one thing to say I want to tour the world, but when I thought that, I hadn't so much as played a gig outside of my home city. So you've got to it's baby steps. So how do you navigate these new opportunities is you have to find the new opportunities first. I strongly believe that you can't not everything will just happen. Some things will be a slow burn, and it's important to have attainable goals. Have a 1 week goal, have a 1 month goal, have a 10-year goal by all means, but have your 1 and 2 week goals. And this is where that schedule I have comes in. Because you won't always be motivated to play a really, we'll say, a gig that's not particularly fun. You won't always be motivated to do that, but you'll always be motivated to work towards your ideal self. So maybe that was a bit more philosophical than musical, but
no,
hey,
that's good.
That's what you signed up for.
Would you change anything that you've done in your career or anything? Have you had any regrets or anything that you wish you did differently or could do differently?
I think that question comes with a number of interesting points, because implying a regret, well, if you say regret, if I regretted something, sure, I regret a lot of things. I regret what I ate for breakfast this morning. I think I could have had put a little more effort in and just cooked those eggs a bit better. But in terms of, are there things that I think I could have done better? Certainly, but maybe in the moment I didn't have the ability to do them quite as well. So in university, I probably should have practiced a lot more technique, for example. But instead, I just wanted to learn tunes and play stuff that was fun. So as a result, my technique's a little bit behind some of my peers, but I think that also gave me, a general appreciation for other kinds of music. So whereas I can have discussions with many kinds of musicians, where maybe some of these people can only chat with half the amount of their peer. Chat with their peers with maybe only 50% of the content. So are there things I could have done differently? Certainly, but I don't think I think every decision I've made has led me to here. And then I feel like I'd say at least 75% of the time I make what I think is the maybe not the best decision, but a good decision in the moment. But there's always no one's perfect, at least of all me.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, do you have any advice for people looking for the same kind of work? You said briefly about, playing in gigs that you don't want to play in. Yeah, so any advice to get in the same kind of area?
The first thing is my recurring theme, which is constantly, you've got to have an overarching goal for what it is you want to do with yourself. And that mightn't be something that's attainable right now. And you will have to do a lot of things to get there. I would encourage you to chat to people who are closer to the point than you are. I realized very quickly that the goal towards famous musician or successful musician was not something that was repeatable, and that's very important to think of. And even if we chat to some of our teachers at the School of Music, my particular I won't say his name out of just identity's sake, but my particular teacher right now for my postgraduate stuff, he's had a really different musical journey than my previous teacher. My previous teacher was he played and that's how he got a lot of his skills. Whereas my current teacher, it was all quite formal education. He sat down and practiced for a long time and didn't play. And then he ended up, and he's built that in a very different manner. So success is not the same for everyone. So my first piece of advice, and I've got two that I can conceptualize right now, is talk to people who've done it better than you, which is pretty much everyone. Make as many friends as you can. And the other advice is make sure you won't always be able to do your best. It's just not possible. You'll have, out of 10 gigs you play, 8 of them will feel pretty hoarse, 1 of them will feel amazing, and 1 of them will feel terrible. And the goal is to make that one, to make it into 2, to make that one really good gig into 3 out of every 10 gigs. So the goal is to not do the best you can in every single scenario, but to instead think about it as a timeline, that you're always improving. So don't ever think that and especially in university, looking at people who are much better than you, and I was always one of the worst players in my faculty as far as I was concerned. It's one thing to say, oh, he can play so much better than me, but identify that where he is versus where you are, or where she is versus where you are, and identify the skills that you have that they don't. I know how to use a microphone better than probably most people who just play guitar. So understand your skills and understand that you are in a particular place in your life and everyone else is in theirs, and we're all just trying to make it through. So talk to people smarter than you and understand where you are. Understand your chapter. So that's my irrefutable advice.
Do you think when you take gigs on, you use the triangle system where it's like it has to have 2 of the 3, like good people, good pay, or good music? Or do you think you just, whatever gig's there, you just take it?
I think there's a forgotten part of that triangle. So what was the triangle that you proposed once more? Could you read that for me?
Good pay, good music, and good people. Because we hear that often, like, discussed. So
I'll flip the question back on you just because I can. Is good music? What is good music to you?
Yeah, I guess it's subjective. I don't really always follow that triangle. So,
because good music to you could be music you really want to play.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. Like, I like playing rock and roll music, not because it's hard, even though I consider it quite difficult music for the most part, but because it's really fun. But I also love playing. Some people sometimes I'll get a composition like, cool, this is an 11/8. Let's have fun with that. So good music is as relative as good pay, because a gig you really want to do might pay really, really well, but it might be really far away. So I have a different theory in terms of that triangle, and I have and I can send you guys a diagram if you want to look at it. But it's just two things of you have a Punnett square, if you know what those are, of value and worth, and whether something has value or does not have value, and whether something has worth or does not. So a gig that has value and worth is something that's music you want to play, and it pays well, and it might be easy to get to, and all these things. That is something that is worth something to me, and it has value to me, and it's worth the time and expense. A gig that I'm playing at a wedding where I've played the same set 35 times that year. It's paying well, but the music's not particularly exciting. I'll still take the gig because it's filling out one of those two things. I might even take a gig that is just music I want to play, but I know I'm not going to make any money out of it. But it's only that last square that matters, where you have it's not worth anything to you and it's not valuable. You can choose to approach that with a technique of, okay, maybe I'll learn something, or maybe you don't play it because you think you have your time is better spent elsewhere. The time you would spend into that is more valuable spent elsewhere. So that triangle is never the way I've thought about it. I've always thought, is this valuable to me and is it worth my time? And that'll change constantly. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question. Take the gigs you feel you have an obligation to take for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's good. That's great advice. It's really insightful. It's good to hear something different than the triangle. We have come to the last question, and we have, it's the most important one.
Okay, I'm worried.
What is your favorite pizza topping?
That is a hard question. That's
yeah.
I should have thought. You did give me the questions beforehand, and I didn't think about this one. I thought I'd just think about it in the moment. But of course,
this will define your
hard.
musical career. This is the moment.
And just for the record, pineapple does belong on pizza.
Yes, it does.
Look, Jordan, you and I can disagree, and that's called discourse.
Can we get a drum roll?
Look, I'm a pepperoni guy.
Oh,
I'm a pepperoni man.
Okay.
It's got to have a bit of flavor. It's got to have a bit of color. It's not chunky. It doesn't get in the way. It is present. That's what it is. It's like a great drummer. He's sitting there and he's killing it. And when you focus on him, you're like, God, he's killing it. But he is supporting everything else. Yeah. That is the role of pepperoni on pizza.
I have to agree. It's not too dramatic. It's just enough.
I'm actually not a fan of pepperoni. I have to put that out there.
Well, and that's called discourse.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thanks for joining us, Hayden, for our first ever podcast.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Jess. Thanks for having me. Number one, I'll always be your first.
That's all for this week's podcast. So we'll see you next Saturday on
J Squared.
Bye.
All right, bye, everyone.
Bye.